Welcome to the Digital Signage Today podcast. I'm Daniel Brown, editor of Digital Signage Today, which is a Networld Media Group publication. We've got a very special guest today. Meghan, do you want to introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. My name is Meghan Athavale, and I'm the CEO of a company called Lumo Interactive. We're best known for a software that we sell called LUMOplay. And I'm really excited to join you. Thanks for having me.
This is awesome. Well, I've heard great things. Excuse me. I've heard great things about your work. We're discussing a topic that's near and dear to my heart. It's something that I've kind of been preaching from the mountaintops from the beginning. The medium is not the message. Making your content stand out in a crowded digital signage landscape. And kudos to those who got the Marshall McLuhan reference. You kind of work in a field where, for a living, you're facilitating content and gathering the attention of people. And it strikes me that it's harder and harder in the age of screen fatigue to do that. And I just kind of wanted to really start out broad. What differentiates your approach to content, and how can people start doing it better?
I think that there's a couple different approaches that we take when we're talking to people about the content that they want to use. Just for a little bit of background, my history is in game development. And so I think when you're developing games, by nature, you're thinking about what the conversation is between the user and the content. And I think a lot of the time, particularly in digital signage, where the tradition is to produce very linear content, the discussion of what the conversation is doesn't happen, or the assumption is that it's one way. So it's informational. You're creating content that, gives people some information at the right time in the right place. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do think that you're making an assumption that people are looking for the information in that place. And a lot of times people don't take a step back and go, what is the person who's going to be experiencing this content? What is their mindset? Where are they coming from? Where are they trying to go? What information would help them to get there? And that's what we try to do when we're developing, whether it's developing content for a museum or for a brand or retail or an activation at a trade show. We really want to take a step back, and rather than think about the medium or talk about what hardware they're going to use or how flashy their LED walls are going to be or what kind of control system they're using, really take a step back and go, the people that are coming to see your content, where is their head at? And what's going to speak to them in that moment the best, and what's going to give them the information that they want. And if there is a two-way exchange, how are they going to interact with your content in an intuitive way?
Because everything, it seems, is becoming more and more interactive. I love that you mentioned the conversation. And it seems to me that there's much more, even with QR codes, mobile interactivity, et cetera, digital signage. It's moving away from the one-to-many kind of mantra that you used to keep hearing. And it's more like, okay, how do you engage the user? On a practical level, how do you do that? Let's say, just to take one example, we have a huge audience in the retail segment. How do you have that conversation with the users in the retail world?
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge for retail because, like you said, it is a pretty noisy landscape. And a lot of the time in a retail setting, whether that's online, searching, the internet for something, or in a real physical space, the competition for people's attention has become just like unprecedentedly high. And so coming up with a way that you can bypass all of that and just reach people at exactly the right moment, I think is the best strategy for retail, as opposed to using, a lot of the time, retail signage is treated like real estate, and people are looking at placement from the perspective of where things already are. Where are the signs? Where are the billboards? What is the traditional way to use window frontage? And I think taking a step back from all of that and thinking about the approach user first and making something that can change over time based on user behavior is the absolute best way to deal with avoiding that fatigue and potentially leveraging a place in which to have that conversation that you may not have thought thought of in the past, or that may not be a traditional example. Something that happened when I was sort of in my 20s and going through the years of hanging out in bars with my friends was a lot of companies started putting up signage in bathroom stalls, and that had a really profound effect. And having that conversation with somebody when they're in a specific space and you know a little bit about their lives just because they're there, you would see ads for student loans, you would see very targeted content in these spaces because the space itself gave you information about who you were targeting. And when we work with retail, I don't see a lot of agencies and campaign managers thinking about the content that way. They're thinking about it like real estate still. And I don't necessarily think that's the best way. I think figuring out what's the message, who are you trying to reach, where are those people, and what's the best time to reach them when it's going to be a time that they're receptive to the message is a much more effective way of delivering that message. But it's also, more difficult, and in a lot of cases, it's not what the current digital signage delivery systems were created to do. So in a sense, you have to think a bit disruptively.
So there's a lot of space for digital signage, CMS designers and so forth to really tweak for this targeted delivery, even in the digital out-of-home advertising space. A lot of people are talking about, look, how do I target my ads and get a higher ROI? Because I want to get that one user that actually wants my message. They want to purchase my product or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Do you have some practical? Oh, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to mention, like, one of my favorite examples of this is you see these crazy billboards. I lived in LA for a couple of years, and it's the only place ever that I've ever lived in my entire life where I've seen billboards go up where my first thought is that is an entire billboard that's meant for like one person. It's specifically meant to target one person. And they do that around the time of the Oscars. And different awards shows where they will find out who's going to be part of the adjudication and really hammer into their heads who's been nominated. And it's not for us. And it's so weird to see such a targeted message. I think Silicon Valley does that as well. Like, you'll see these billboards for technology that is so the name is like high speed fast tech cloud.io or whatever. It's like, unless you know exactly what it is already, it's not something you're going to go home and look up.
You got to throw in a quantum though, right? Everything's got to have a quantum in it.
Yeah, now it is, or .ai.
Quantum.ai, we've got a company.
But I mean, it's so targeted at a very, very, very specific group of people using such a widespread public medium. And I don't think that a lot of agencies realize that that's something that you can do. You can subvert the existing systems and hit like a demographic in a very measurable way by figuring out where are they commuting to and from work, and by doing these very short activations that are designed to be obscure. So yeah, I think there's a few really good examples of that I could list. So
you're reminding me, we covered how taxis are coming back in a very big way. And I think we chatted with someone from Curb, which is a company that's targeting ads in taxi cabs, basically, around the country. Yeah. And if you sign up for the membership, it can actually track what you're interested in and give you more and more relevant, okay, there's a sale at your favorite restaurant that you stop at on the corner or whatever, which is fascinating.
Yeah, giving people agency over what they see is another really good way of targeting your ads in an effective and sort of like more meaningful way. And I think it shows respect for the consumer to a certain extent too, because, you're giving them the option to not only opt into things, but also opt out of them. And I think that's pretty powerful and, something that we've only really had technology to do very recently.
That's amazing. I love that. And it kind of ties into, we talked about accessibility with Michelle Montazeri from LeGrand a while back. And this idea of, well, why don't we have accessibility by default and you can opt out of it if you don't want it? And it makes me wonder, how do we have accessible content? I don't think we have enough of this conversation in the industry.
I do a lot of design for museums and educational facilities, and this is a topic that comes up quite a bit because I think there are certain sort of standards and guidelines that you can fall back on and that a lot of people do fall back on. But my personal opinion is that the best way to design accessible content is with people who need accessible content. So, go do outreach and focus groups and talk to people, if you have blind taxi riders, find out what kinds of messaging they would want to see in those cabs, and what kind of resources they would need in order to opt in or out of services or tailor the services. And I mean, incorporating accessibility tools into digital signage can work both ways. Like you can incentivize people to pay attention to your ads if the ads are giving them resources that can help them in their day-to-day lives. So, if you get into a cab and you have a card with you, that automatically informs the driver that, you have your sight impaired, your hearing impaired, you maybe need a little bit of assistance getting in and out. Like, those are all things that I think can tie into advertising systems to make them more personalized, and it can be done in a tasteful and sensible way without it being intrusive. So I think that's one of the things that comes up, like in museums in particular, a lot. And with tracking tools, we do a lot of motion and gestural interactive installations. The absolute best way to get to know and understand the audience is with a lot of focus testing. So bringing in as diverse a group as possible to interact with your content and give you feedback on whether or not the content's being well delivered, what could be improved. And a lot of the time, your best ideas will come from your target audience.
It's one of the great themes, isn't it? Listening to your audience and not just preaching from the mountaintop and beaming out this message. You're going to accept it whether you like it or not. You're expected to enter, as you say, that conversation, which is so important, I think, even in terms of business, good business practices. That's amazing. Now, I always ask people, I'm curious, because people keep making the same pitfalls. What are some of the biggest don'ts that you would just scream at people, please stop doing this in your content? Do not do this. It does not work.
If you're designing something and one of your key success metrics is that it is different, that it be different than other experiences, that it be eye-catching. A lot of agencies like to use the phrase wow factor. If you're going after wow factor, do not pick your hardware first. The wow doesn't come from the hardware. Doesn't matter if you have the giantest sphere in Las Vegas, if you haven't put together a plan for generating content for said sphere that makes sense in that environment. And I think a lot of the time what we find with clients is that they'll see somebody else do something, and they'll get really excited about it, but they won't really have the critical, a lot of the time they don't even have the personal one-on-one experience with it. A really great example that we encounter all the time is there's a company in Japan called Team Lab, and they do absolutely stunning, immersive, interactive environments. I would say they're the top in the world for combining digital and physical technology into immersive, experiential installations. But they're very, 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 very driven by content. They spend a lot of time studying nature. They work on particle simulations. They do a lot of stuff in-house that isn't like off the shelf, and it's very site specific.
Wow. And
we'll have customers come to us and say, well, I like their waterfall that I saw in this video on YouTube. It's like, they don't even understand the scope of, I had somebody recently ask me they saw a video of a very long interactive hallway. And they said, I'd really like to do that. And I took the measurements of their hallway, and I said, that's going to be, 25 projectors. Or do you have the budget for that? That's a lot of projectors. Then you have to think about the thermals and and I think a lot of the time people don't think, what am I trying to achieve with this? They just go, oh, that looks cool, I want that. And so I think that's the biggest stumbling block for a lot of the clients that I deal with, is they've already bought the hardware, and they'll come to us and they'll say, we bought this giant thing that we want to use, and it's not right for their space. It's not something they can sustain. It's not something they can afford to generate content for. You've got a custom aspect ratio or something wrapping around a wall, or a curved surface, you're going to need to bring in, and like those forced perspective pieces as well. Like, you can't just hire, any design studio to create that for you. You need somebody that understands anamorphic content. So
just have the intern do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's not a library for that. Like it's weird when people, I mean, I think I've gotten used to it, but it definitely surprises me when we are approached by companies who've already purchased their hardware without thinking through what they actually want to use it for. I just don't think that's the right way to approach any sort of digital signage project. I think you need to really think about the message. And if you are just solely a content producer and you're looking for the best place to put your content, it's the same rules apply. Don't just look for the biggest, flashiest place. Think about who your audience is and where it makes sense. What's the environment that content is going to make sense in? And it might be a bathroom stall.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I have nothing to add. That was so perfect. It might be a bathroom stall. The future of digital advertising. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Or the back of a cab, like bigger isn't always better.
Right. I love that. Well, you're speaking my language. We've been preaching for a while now. It's not just about buying the big shiny thing that looks cool. It's about communicating your message in a way that sticks and is relevant and surprises and delights and all of that good stuff.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Listen, I talked to you for hours, and as a gamer, we have a separate conversation later that we'll just have to talk about. I'm finally trying Fallout 76. We'll see how it goes.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
That's a long conversation.
Yeah.
But no, so I'm curious, as we kind of get towards time, do you have any broad, like, if I hand you the mic, what's your big message on content to folks in digital signage? What would you like to see people doing more of, less of?
I mean, I think I'd like to speak a little bit around using AI to generate content, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it's good at and what it's not good at. One of the things that it's really good at is concepting, but it's not good at repeating things. So I think one of the things that I would like really caution people about in terms of using AI in any of their projects is you still need somebody who understands composition and somebody who understands how to create repeatable content in that workflow. And so if you're a client and you're sitting around like playing with Dolly or Firefly or any of the other image or video generation tools, you can make one or two very cool things, but you can't use AI to replace storytelling, and you can't use AI to replace people who understand how to get a proper shot, how to use images and videos emotively. There's a lot of mimicry. There's a lot of it taking a library and guessing at what might work, but there's no thought. And I think that that becomes very apparent in longer term projects. We have worked with clients who have come to us with mood boards that are like 100% just AI generated. And it's really difficult for content creators to work off of something that was generated with in most cases off of something that was generated with AI rather than in partnership with a designer who's actually sort of taking the steps to think through what the point of the content is. And I'm seeing that more and more, and it's a little bit concerning because I think people think it's going to save them money, but in the end it costs quite a bit more if you start out that way without thinking things through. Or like if you are coming up with content and you don't have the process figured out from the get-go, because a lot of the time then you're reverse engineering everything at the end and trying to apply a process at the end after this thing has gone through a number of iterations, and that's a lot more difficult and a lot more costly.
Oh, I love that. I just got chills as a creator. I love that. We've all had some difficult times around the way AI was rolled out. Not the fact of AI, the way it was rolled out. That's a separate conversation.
And who owns it, I think can be a little bit concerning too.
Right.
But, yeah.
We'll have you on for a follow-up podcast just about that. Right.
Sure.
I love it. Well, Meghan, thank you so much. I wish we had more time. Thank you for joining us. Just so people can follow your adventures and your productions, how can they follow you? What's the best way?
I am at LUMOplay on every social media platform. So it's just like LUMOplay, LUMOPLAY. My company is 3 people, so I do all the social media. If you send us a message, it'll come to me.
3 people and a cat, right? I saw a cat back there. It was wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. And if you go to our website, you'll see a lot of the cats demonstrating our interactive experiences. So.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, listen, folks, please subscribe so that you can be notified when there are new episodes of the Digital Signage Today podcast. We've had a wonderful conversation with Meghan, and we hope to see you again next time.